It's a trap!
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
This is the Team of Rivals podcast.
Everything you want to hear from the big sports to the big screen.
He's all by himself, fires into the end zone. Caught! Touchdown! No! Vaughn into the windup in his first offering. Just a bit outside. He tried the corner and missed.
He doesn't like you. I don't like you either.
Time winding down. Michael for three. Yes! She is gone!
I can't believe what I just saw!
Go crazy, folks! Go crazy! You believe in miracles? Yes!
You may fire when ready.
What?
All right, everyone. It's a bit of a leap of faith for us tonight. We are venturing into new territory, trying to simul-stream into different areas. We are live, should be live on Periscope tonight, live on YouTube, and live on Facebook. We're using a little bit new software tonight, something we're experimenting around with. We've had a couple soft launch nights, if you will, the last couple of nights. Both my co-hosts are making a tremendous background noise. I've got them both on mute. In fact, I could think about doing a little bit of a solo show tonight, possibly if I wanted to. So I won't do that to them. But welcome, everyone. This is the first episode in a bit of a new direction we're going to take here, where we have nearly exclusively been baseball for the last 3.5 years. We know we've ventured off course from time to time, mostly in the off season, mostly when we had some kind of Star Wars news or something that we could talk about. But we're officially in new territory here, so we're going to branch off. We're going to talk about the things that interest us most. What the ironic thing about this week is we're making this, we're planting our flag on this hill. We're willing to die on it, that we're going to be more than just baseball, because we found through this pandemic we've enjoyed just having conversations about the other things we like in life besides baseball. The funny thing about tonight is probably what's going to eat up half the show is baseball, because there is a lot of noise around baseball this week, and we are still covering sports. So we're going to probably just go right there, and it's going to sound like the show that you're always used to. I didn't really mean to leave it like that, but we're going to do it anyway. So I'm welcoming on my co-hosts tonight, Pete Geddes and Elliott Dewey. Pete had a plan to launch us off tonight. And Pete, I don't remember what that was. It was a vague text. Likely I was drinking when you sent it. And I kind of remember how you wanted to kick this off. So I'm going to let you go. You had a plan to do this. You don't have to remind me what it is on the fly. Hopefully I'll pick up on it.
I think I sent the text at like 6 o'clock in the morning here. So kudos to you for starting to drink that early. I mean, if that's what it takes to get through the day, way to go, buddy.
I wouldn't. Don't count me out.
No, what my idea was, because, we've obviously picked up a lot of listeners since we first started this thing 3.5 years ago. And I think that people may have pieced our stories together little by little over the years. But the thought was that maybe it's time for us to just reintroduce ourselves to all of our followers, all of our viewers, as it were, who are watching us simultaneously, finally, on YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope. We have arrived. We are in the year 2020 as cars drive by in the background.
That's okay. We can do it.
But yeah, my thought was that the three of us just kind of go through and reintroduce ourselves to the audience, explain where we're from, and the things that shaped us that have led to this podcast, not just our sports fandom, but also our pop culture fandom and the things that really interest us. And I think it'd be interesting as well for people to find out just how we got to know each other, because there are some good stories in there.
And some stories that Elliott and I probably cannot share on live entertainment. That's cool. Elliott, you know what? We're going to go from youngest member to oldest member Do I want to do that? We're going to go from,
Wait,
as you're
do you
watching it
wanna
as
go
a viewer.
youngest looking or youngest?
I'd still have to go with
Because then I
Elliott.
should go first.
Oh, I don't think so.
Come on.
Let's go.
Look at
Normally,
the screen in front of you and tell me that I don't look the youngest of the three of us. You know it's true.
I mean, Ron and I
We'll actually
do
have to take
the
a
most
vote on
gray
that.
hair between the three of us.
we also have
so
the most hair.
That is also
I want to do this a little different. Normally, Pete, when we do this, I'd start with me, then we go to you, then we go to Elliott. I want to do this in reverse. I want to go from right to left, basically because I'm trying to buy myself time to check everything on my end. So go ahead, Elliott. You joined us later. We were about a year into it, but
yeah.
I'd like you to start.
Yeah, it was. Pete was gone. He was on a work trip. He wasn't going to be able to join. I just had been following the podcast, listening in when I can, sending kind of some texts and stuff like that because everything had interested me because I was a big Cubs fan.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that first night was on, I got shit-faced because it was Cubs playoffs. And apparently I was entertaining enough that you asked me to come back.
I didn't know how bad it was going to get, but you were way more disciplined on those first shows. And as you joined the show officially, you've progressively gotten worse. You've kind of plateaued. You haven't gotten any worse. That's the good news. But you found your niche on the show. You've found your role on the show, and your role is to basically be a black box on the other end that just basically does whatever you want from time to time. And so we appreciate that. And if we didn't enjoy it, you wouldn't be here anymore, but we kind of enjoy it.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. So, and I know that, so kind of reintroducing ourselves, I mean, because that's where we want to go, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, a lot of our listeners know us because, I'm a Cubs fan, Pete's a Cubs fan, you're a Cardinals fan.
Right.
We've got this great rivalry. It's kind of how I think you and I, Ron, actually liked each other because we could bullshit about baseball while girls did other things. So, but yeah, in Star Wars, I mean, we're all avid Star Wars fans. I'm an avid Star Wars fan. I mean, one of my first memories of Star Wars was when I was a little kid. I had asthma as a child very badly. Back in the early 80s, and what I wanted to do when I didn't feel good is my dad would throw in the Betamax of Star Wars that he had copied from probably a TV run, and we would sit and watch that every single night that I had a coughing fit. And that's how I became a huge Star Wars fan, because my dad liked it, and that's what I wanted to watch. So I grew up loving it. And I just kept on going. And I became a Cubs fan because of my dad. My dad was a Cubs fan in a family of Sox fans. So he was the odd man out. And my first ball game was with him, sitting on first base side against the San Francisco Giants. And the weird thing was, my favorite player was Will Clark.
That's incredible. I didn't know that. I don't know if you told me that, but Elliott, you're notorious now for not telling us things. No,
and you know what's funny, on my notes,
you took notes.
Yeah, I know, crazy.
Hey, you've been taking notes every show.
I have to jump in real quick here. That's a throwback to when Anthony Serafini came on the show with us, Ron.
And he had notes.
He took notes. And the important thing to remember is he didn't get any of his notes into the actual show because we just went way off. He's sitting there in my dining room. He's like, "What the hell's happening?" So good luck with that.
So pretty obvious. He hadn't really been listening to our show, because if you come to our show with notes and you think you're going to be able to walk through them, you better think again, because that's not how this works. It's never how it's worked, ever. Yeah, that's great. And I'm gonna throw it to you now, Pete. Now I remember those times, Pete. Sometimes especially in the fall and the spring, I know that your school schedule can become crazy, and there's a lot of nights that are kind of iffy to you. You're usually very good about giving us a warning. So I was able to grab Elliott, one, because I knew he was a Cub fan, and I knew he had very similar interests to us. And so I think that we're not gonna get sappy on the show night shit. We never do that. Why waste our time? But I think Elliott's been a good fit, and that's why this has worked for as long as it has. So Pete actually didn't want anybody else on. He was very territorial. He's like a male cat who's lived with a single woman, and then a guy moves in, and he's just kind of like pawing at you. But I think Pete's warmed up to you. I think Pete might actually like you better than me now. Hell, I don't know.
That doesn't take much.
Thanks.
Let's do. Hey, by the way, since this is our soft launch, I've got comments on YouTube that the echo is back.
Is it? Okay, I will hunt through it, and I'll let Pete... the echo is back. That's great. Okay, well, I will search the channels here, and I figured it out. It is you, Elliott. It's my fault, though, because I'm the one that set you up on this end, and the echo should be gone.
All right.
Pete.
You two people, let us know.
The fan noise, the fan ambiance, I should say. It's not noise, it's ambiance. The fan ambiance is not gone.
Oh, it's not? Okay.
But that's what we count on for Elliott.
Okay.
I'm just disappointed that Elliott opened his beer before the show started. That is way...
Yeah, that is out of character. He was trying to slip in with at least 30 seconds of professionalism tonight before it deteriorated quickly. And so, anyway, what I'll say here is, Pete, you go ahead and let's hand it over to you. It's your turn. We're already 14 minutes in. This is only supposed to be a 15 to 20-minute segment, and we've already run past it. Go ahead.
Well, that's all right, because we're going to circle back around because I have some questions that I'm going to prompt you guys with once we've done the personal introductions.
Okay.
But as always, no notes. So my sports fandom, I actually started out, my big sport when I was a kid was football. And that's because my family is from Wisconsin. I still have a lot of family there. And so I grew up a diehard Packers fan. And scandalized the family when in the, I want to say it was the early 80s. It was probably somewhere around 81 or 82. I declared my fandom for the Bears, that I had switched. I was no longer a Packers fan. And I declared that I was now a Bears fan. And the vitriol that I got from my family, and still receive, because I prefer the Bears over the Packers, left a lasting impression, and I think that it ultimately colored our friendship, Ron. Because as I became a Packers or a Cubs fan, as I previously stated, which started in 1984, that's where I learned, I think, how to hate. And it was all just prologue to finally being your friend.
That's right.
As far as pop culture, yeah, I think like the three of us, the biggest pop culture influence in my life has been Star Wars. And all the things that I'm interested in pop culture, whether it's books, film, television, a lot of my taste is influenced by my dad. He's the one who introduced me to Alfred Hitchcock films. He's the one who taught me how to appreciate old films, film noir, black and white. He's the one who showed me my favorite film to this day, and that's Casablanca. And that was all because of my dad. But he was the one who took me to Carroll Cinema in DeKalb, Illinois in 1977. And I figured it out. I think it was in August 1977. I still remember standing in line. I remember people being dressed up as stormtroopers as we stood in the line, and then going into the theater and seeing Star Wars. And that was it. I was hooked. And anybody who had any interest in Star Wars from that day forward was immediately a friend of mine, especially if they had any of the action figures that I didn't have, so that we could completely recreate the saga between my Star Wars action figures and theirs. And then it went beyond that. I just went further and further down the nerd hole as I got older, and, Dungeons and Dragons and wearing the same shirt 3 or 4 times in a week and growing a mullet, all the good stuff that a teenager of the late 80s and very early 90s does, to distinguish themselves as not worthy of attention from girls. And that's how we ended up where we are today.
Yeah, you know what? Well, I think that whole notion has changed because I've seen matchups of girls to guys in this sci-fi realm, whether you're talking about the cosplay type of stuff or anything else, and it's not the case anymore. The nerds get the women now. The worm has turned.
I know. I was a nerd 20 years too early. That's all.
Yep,
I was not
you
born in
were
my
a man
time.
ahead of your time. That's cool. For me, gosh, I've been talking about this so much with Cromer over there on Two Birds on a Back. 'Cause I do that show on Tuesday. So with a void in baseball for weeks and weeks and weeks, we've gone back and reminisced about, hey, when did it click for us, and when did we become fans? And I think I can pinpoint the year was 1985, not because the Cardinals went to the World Series, because that was one of the years I went to my first game, at least the first game that I could recall at 9 years old, and I could actually follow because I had been playing Little League for a few years, so I actually understood what the hell I was watching. The 80s Cardinals were a great team to watch because you had the speedsters, you had Willie McGee, Vince Coleman. You had those guys that you could. Yep, I know. Thank you. I got it. This I told you it's going to be a learning curve for me. You had Vince Coleman, Willie McGee, Ozzie Smith, Tommy Herr. You had Darryl Porter catching. You had arms like Danny Cox and John Tudor, Joaquin Andujar. It was a fun team to watch, and it was a different style of baseball. But I remember going to the park that year and watching Vince Coleman in his rookie season steal. I didn't watch him steal all 110 plus bases, but I got to see him steal about 4 against the Pirates on back-to-back nights. So it was just really cool. And yeah, it's kind of a screwed up story. It's going to sound screwed up because we're in this day and age, but then it was completely normal. I would go to the bowling alley with my dad on Wednesdays, and I remember Cardinals would usually be playing a game on Wednesdays, and so he'd go bowl however many games with my uncle, and he'd give me a few bucks, and I'd go into the bar and I'd order combos and a Coke with cherry poured in it, and I'd sit there and I'd watch the game. And the bartender, the lady, got to know me. She knew exactly what I wanted. It was like I was Norm, except I just needed combos and that Coke with a little bit of grenadine splash in it, and I was good to go. I remember watching almost the entire playoffs there. But, from that point on, that was really the year it started for me. And so I kind of followed the family tradition. It goes to my dad. It goes to his dad. It goes to, my great-granddad who used to race horses down in the St. Louis area in southern Illinois. And, the whole family grew up rooting for St. Louis. But at the same time, I have blood relatives, cousins that are diehard Cubs fans. So it's kind of an interesting way to grow up where you have, your grandma's house is divided amongst you and your cousins with who roots for what. Half of them are wearing blue, half are wearing red. So I just kind of grew up there, and that was the way the whole town was. It was 50-50. Peoria's almost 50-50. Bloomington's almost 50-50. When you grow up in central Illinois, it's a DMZ between Cubs and Cardinals country. So I've known Cubs fans my whole life. And so that's my baseball history. I'm not going to go into my history as a player because I sucked. I was such a good player. I ended up in the Marine Corps. At age 19. So yeah, that's how good I was. So enough of that. The other half is one of my earliest memories, very earliest memories. And it wasn't, I've always known this. My mom still doesn't know how I know this because I was only 3 years old. I remember going to see Star Wars. Now, when I was 3 years old, it was 1978. So it wasn't the first run. It wasn't the first year it was released. It's probably the re-release in the second year when they put it out again. And the first place I saw it was a drive-in movie theater. But it didn't matter. It's still the thing that wasn't the ships flying overhead at the beginning that hooked me as a kid. It was the stormtroopers busting through that door and seeing those white armored uniforms. I mean, that was it, man. That was, for me, that was the moment where in the early 80s, my uncle owned something called I'm going to screw this up. It was not a capacitance disc. Anyway, it's a CED player. It's a capacitance disc player, and it was not a laser disc. It preceded laser discs. It preceded DVDs. It preceded VHS. It was a big ass, almost like a, about the size of you could slide them into milk. He stored them in milk crates, and if you stored 30 of these movies in milk crates, it was like a 2-man lift to pick them up. The
capacitance electronic disc
there you
is
go.
an analog video disc playback system developed by RCA in which video and audio could be played back on a TV set using a special needle and high-density groove system similar to phonograph records.
That's right.
I just pulled that one out of my ass.
No, you're looking at it on your computer. But it would hold half the movie on one side and the other half on the other. And I'm telling you right now, I wore that thing out over a summer, watching the original Star Wars on that thing. And the interesting thing about that is that movie's only 2 hours, 120. those discs only hold 60 minutes on each side. We know that the original Star Wars is a little over that. So what did they cut out? I actually bought one on eBay. I'm scared to buy a player because I don't know if they'll work or not. But I bought the disc, just kind of a shelf, a bookshelf type of thing, and I've got the Empire Strikes Back and I've got the Star Wars cut. But those are interesting mediums right there. I mean, they weren't around very long, but I do remember that if you had a milk crate full of those things, you couldn't even lift it, at least as a kid. So, yeah, Star Wars has been part of me, part of what I followed, part of what I follow still today. We've talked about it enough on the show. Anybody who's listened to us knows exactly where we would take this conversation. But yeah, so my history with Pete, though, in this podcast was I met Pete. We were both salesmen at Sears. I had just gotten out of the military. I was finishing my bachelor's degree. It might have been a matter of minutes. Hey, baseball, Star Wars, Star Wars. And, we've been friends since 2001. Went to games together. He set me, somebody he knows set me up on 2 horrible blind dates. I never trusted him again after that. Of course, I shouldn't even have trusted myself, but that's best man in his wedding, one of the best men in my wedding, and then history is there. My history with Elliott is it's a dark and storied, disturbing. We used to work together in an abandoned hospital there in Bloomington. It's not there anymore, thank God, because it was voted one of the top 10 scary places in the U.S., and I understand why. It was an old Mennonite hospital. I'm not going to talk about the company. But yeah, the 3rd floor was untouched. It was a record storage area, and there were still writing on the walls and heavy-ass doors, and you wonder what they stored. The records behind those heavy doors weren't what I was worried about. It was who were the people behind those heavy doors. That's what I was worried about, and did any still linger up on the 3rd floor in that wing? Whenever I had a bad day, I tried to go up there, and most of the time I'd piss myself halfway through, turn around, and go back. I never had the balls to walk all the way through it, especially when it was getting dark in the late hours. So that's my quick history. How I know these guys. We're all baseball fans. We're all Star Wars fans primarily, and that's why we exist here on this show together.
Hang on though. Because I want to get the other side of the story. So I'll tell my side after you, Elliott. Let's hear your side of meeting Ron for the first time, getting to know him.
He doesn't recall.
Yes.
Most
Very.
likely. That's probably not far off. If I had to guess, I don't know, Elliot. I can't say it because we met through, I think the ladies we know at the time. I think that's
my ex was friends with your current.
Yep.
And you guys came over for just to hang out, have beers on the back porch of the place. God, in Bloomington, I think it was the condo that we lived in. And we proceeded, it was very awkward at first because we were both kind of forced to be in this situation.
Yeah.
And then after about 4 or 5 beers, we loosened up a little bit, and it kind of like between you and Pete, baseball? Yeah. Star Wars? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's pretty much how it went.
I wonder, Elliott, if we didn't meet before, and just neither of us recall it, because I remember going down to Ron's one time for a party, and I don't remember, was it your birthday?
Sarah's.
Ron?
It was Sarah's.
Was it Sarah's?
Sarah's 30th. Yeah.
And we drove down there, and there was a lot of drinking, and I made the foolish boast that because Ron was having a hell of a time playing Flip Cup, and I made the foolish boast that if he flipped it and his team won, that I would pay for his kid's college education. And that was when he hit it.
I hit it on the first try. I was setting you up.
So were you there?
I think so.
Okay.
I think you were too. I don't know if you were there for that incident, but Pete corrected himself. He walked that back a little bit after I did it, and he said, hey, "Oh, did I mention that I would pay for it as long as he went to Heartland?"
That sounds like me.
Yeah, you did. You added that at the end after the fact. It was much like a topic we're getting ready to talk about now, where we agreed on one set of things, and then after it happened, you modified it a little bit. And I think that is
I altered the deal.
you did, and somebody else who is attempting to alter a major deal. We're gonna now shift off the personal topic here and go on to.
Oh, come on! No, you have to let me finish how you and I met.
Oh,
Because
I didn't.
you
Okay,
got your
Oh,
side
yeah,
of the story. I have to throw my side. I know I put it out there before.
Oh yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
So this is
I hope you're
this
not.
is
go
how
ahead.
well Ron and I hit it off. I still can't believe that we only met in 2001 because that meant that we only worked together for what, maybe 3 or 4 months then.
That's it. Yeah.
And
I
it
moved
doesn't
to
feel like
Bloomington in January of 01, and I think you graduated. I threw you a little graduation party that went out of control. I don't even want to talk about it.
When did we not have a party that went out of control? And I left in July, but it's hard for me to fathom that we didn't meet in 2000 because I think that we hit it off that well.
Yeah.
So here's my side of the story. You're right. That first time that we got scheduled together, I'm sure it was pretty much that baseball, Star Wars. Okay. The thing that sticks out in my head though was I think it was within days of our working together. It was a Saturday.
Oh no.
And it was a slow day, and we were all like we always did. We were stationed out on the aisle of the electronics department, and we were just shooting shit. I think I was there with Mac, and Ron comes walking through with his then fiance, and they were heading into the mall, and we must have talked for I don't know 5-10 minutes. Ron introduced us. They were heading into the mall and everything. They walk away. They walk through Sears and head off. And I turned to Mac and I said, "He's miserable." And I declared, I made it my goal that I would break him off.
You
Mission
acted.
accomplished.
Yeah, you acted as a catalyst there. And you know what? I know. Look, she's never going to listen to this show or watch the show ever. But I will say, I feel sorry for her in this regard. Look, we had been together in high school, and we stayed together as much as physically possible while I was gone. So you're talking almost a 9-10 year span here. I got out of the Marine Corps, which was a very structured way of life, a very different way of living than all of a sudden when you're turned onto the free world. And that girl had to deal with somebody who was struggling to figure out who the hell they were for the first year, getting out of a lifestyle and trying to reinsert yourself into, I can make any choice I want to now when you couldn't in the previous 5 years. And I imagine living with me or attempting to start anything with me, the guy that you knew then versus the guy that just got out of the military was probably a nightmare. And so as bad as I may have looked, I guarantee you she looked worse, or she probably felt worse about me. So I'm just trying to even the scale here because it was probably not a good idea to launch into something like that when you get out of something you've committed to for 5 years. And trust me, a military lifestyle is way different than when you're just a college student working part-time and hoping to actually start your life a little later than people you knew before that had already, basically, they're already in it. They're already doing it. They're already adults. And I wasn't yet, to be honest with you. I was playing catch up, right? I didn't have the fraternity life. I had the Marine Corps life, which is shit, man. Those things are different, regardless of how you want to talk about it. Reacclimating yourself to society and normalcy was not easy. I was a mess that first year.
Well, and it didn't help, and I'm going to absolve both of you of some of the blame. It didn't help to have a 6'6" devil lurking over your shoulder who 6'5". Who was probably at the height of his confidence at any time during his life.
Yeah.
And who was single, telling you, "Ron, let's go have fun."
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Let's go.
And then, I had so many great influences on my life. Then I had Mac McKinley, who was my trainer at Sears, who you forgot about that, didn't you? This is, I'm telling you right now, and I love the guy to death. We both do. We'll never meet anybody like Mac ever again.
Nope.
And he's one of a kind. But I'm telling you, I've never met anybody in my life that needed so little and was fine with that. And I'm telling you right now, just let me illustrate what he was like at the time. didn't want to talk to customers at Sears unless he absolutely had to. And we were paid on commission at that time.
You're understating that. It's not that he didn't want to talk to customers.
He went out of his way.
Actively walk away from customers.
Or he would, because there were no shirts or aprons or anything we had to wear working there. We wore whatever, business casual clothes we had. And I can't tell how many times I'd see the guy remove his name tag because it was just pinned in your shirt. And he'd see somebody walking towards him, he'd just kind of and slip it off and just stuff it in his pocket and just turn to the PlayStation demo that was out and just that's basically what he would do.
I have seen the guy do a full work shift playing Tony Hawk and never do anything else that day.
You guys somebody's playing me on speaker. I can hear myself. How am I hearing myself?
No. That was my head.
I just got a text from an old friend of those times, Mr. Duquesne, Dustin Duquesne, has texted me. He said he's watching on YouTube. I would invite him. I know since you're watching right now, I invite you to go ahead and call because I can get you in on the show, and you can chat us up for a few minutes if you would like. I don't want to press you. I know this is kind of I was going to try a joke and say this is a celebrity thing. We damn well know it's not. Mac lived on Little Debbie's, and Dustin would know because Mac lived with him for a brief period of time. So that's funny. Dustin, if you want to call in, please call the number. You have it, and we can chat it up on the phone. We'd actually love to hear from you. Okay, I think enough about us. Were you going to keep going, Pete, or was that it? Because yes, you were a terrible influence on a very confused young man in his mid-20s. Which shouldn't be that confused in your mid-20s, but I was. I think that you mentioned something earlier. I think a really great segue was, changing the deal partway through. The biggest story right now in sports, by far, is weeks ago the Major League Baseball owners agreed on a proposal that they were going to turn over to the union. Now, that was supposed to happen about almost a week and a half before it actually did get turned over to the union. And on the day it's turned over, we already start hearing that the union, I mean, we all speculated, right? They're gonna barf all over the first proposal, right? They're entering into a negotiation here. Owners or union, they're gonna lowball you on the first offer no matter what. We all knew this. We all knew the players wouldn't like it. There'd be things they wouldn't accept. But it appears that the union at one point agreed, because I think they recognize that the virus is not something created by either party. It's an outside force interfering. I think they had their hearts in the right place. They agreed to half their salary for an 82-game season. Owners did too, with a catch that if it was financially tenable. So what did that mean? Did the union take it as, hey, look, if we have to come back to the stadiums without fans, does that bring us back to the table? And we got to have some further talks about how the players are compensated, given that the owners are going to lose anywhere from what I heard today was at least 40% of their revenue is generated on fans just being in the ballpark, be it ticket sales, concessions, merchandise, etc. Right? And look, I don't know one way or the other if that's true. That's probably like on an average number.
Well, there was a response from the Ricketts today that said 70% of the revenues come from having fans in the stands
for their team.
Yeah, you got to think about it. Now, what skews that number? If the Ricketts say 70, baseball says on average 40%. What causes that? Is it teams like Tampa, who, yeah, they maybe only 35% of their revenue comes from actually people being there because nobody's there. Like most of their revenue might actually come from TV or something else, or revenue sharing.
And also I'm sure it's skewed by teams that have been able to build or get renovations to a ballpark subsidized by their local governments, which the Cubs didn't have.
Yeah,
so all
true.
of the improvements to Wrigley Field, which technically, and I'm not even talking about the rooftops or the neighborhood or anything, just all the improvements to Wrigley Field, that technically is part of the baseball.
And I hope, and I really hope I'm not wrong about this, Pete, but I believe that that the Cardinals ballpark was privately funded. And so that's something else right there. But you got to take this. I believe the Cardinals percentage could potentially be higher than 40%. Because you think about it, the investment that ownership group has made in Ballpark Village, the businesses in the surrounding area, the parking decks, everything. Like, this isn't just about people going through the turnstiles or having their tickets scanned. This is about what they're paying for in and outside of the ballpark. And so,
and that I think is the basis of the disagreement with the players union is players want Major League Baseball to open the books because they want to see all that ancillary income. Because I'm sure that if you ask the Cardinals, they would say, "Oh no, that's not part of our revenue, right? It's revenue, but it's not part of the baseball revenue. They don't count that when they're talking about taking a loss this year." Same thing with the Cubs. The money that they make on Hotel Zachary. They're not counting that as baseball revenue, but they are certainly enjoying that because of the proximity to Wrigley Field. And it's unlikely that they're including the money that they get from the rooftops as baseball revenue because that doesn't go directly to the Cubs.
Yes, I agree. We have on the line not Mr. Duquesne. We have Braden, who attempted to FaceTime in, but I'm going to put him on just a phone call for right now. One, so I don't have to stare at him curling his hair. And just a bit of his forehead, Braden. But the reason I'm putting you on the phone is because we might have Dustin that could be calling in. The only way I can get you guys on together is by putting you on the phone and linking your call. Are you okay with that?
No, that's not a name I've heard in a long time.
Oh, pulled out a Star Wars line. That's good. We're not on Star Wars yet, but we will get there. What we're talking about right now, if you've been listening, is the back and forth now between the players' union and the players. Major League Baseball and the owners. Look, I think it was a great gesture all around that they agreed to half their pay. So if I look at it from a player's perspective, right, without seeing the proof, Pete, hey, look, I agreed to do half my work for half my pay. You're still asking me to do potentially half my work, but now you're asking me to take a third of my pay, right? And so you get it initially on the surface. You look at that and like, well, shit, that's not right. But you look at how businesses are run, right? From a business standpoint, if you're an owner, I do this every day, almost every day in my own job, that you have to look at something that you're proposing to do, and you have to look at it and go, is it worth doing or not? And you have to make a tough call. And so I get it. Owners for Major League Baseball teams, not all of them, by the way, a lot of them can absorb sitting a season out, right? Let's face it. The Yankees can absorb missing a season. The Cardinals could absorb missing a season. The Dodgers, the Red Sox. Look, most of those teams probably, they're going to feel it and they're going to hate it, but they're going to survive. You take the Pittsburghs, Kansas City, Oakland. Those are the teams that are going to really be walloped, right, by missing out.
And those are the teams that, are probably looking at, you look at the numbers. I would throw the White Sox in there because despite playing in a major market, they are a small market team when it comes to their baseball operations.
Yep.
And those teams are looking at it. And let's say that in the most optimistic scenario, they determine that they're going to lose, let's say, $50 million, right? That they go forward, they get the agreement, they play baseball, they're going to lose $50 million this year. Well, why take on the liability and the expense and the headaches when just shutting down the season and losing $70 million, but not having to deal with the liability and all the fears of starting the season and then having it close? I think those are the teams that are really pushing this more than it is the big market clubs, because I think you're right.
I would agree.
The big market clubs can survive this. I think it's the small ones that are already operating on thin margins that are looking at it and saying, what's the difference between a $20 million loss? And I don't have to go through all the headaches of worrying about the health of my players, the health of all my employees. If I can't get a financial deal that benefits me and that makes it more tenable, I'm out.
Yeah, because you'd have to think there are some at this point right now, nobody wins in this, right? They're all losing money this year, regardless. They're not going to make in 2020 what they had planned on making. Nobody wins in this thing. It's how do you minimize your loss? At the same time, how do we ensure that we don't screw up 2021 and 22 and beyond? By the way, there's a CBA coming up in 2022. If this creates a further rift, that I believe was going to be overcome months ago. Now there's a new one, brand new fissure that's formed. And so what's this going to do with the CBA if they cannot solve this year? It's going to be, look, this could be a rough 3 or 4 or 5 years for baseball, starting right now with this, if they can't figure this out. But again, I'll go back to my point. Like, you look at something, you look at a proposal on the table, are you better off doing it? It's a do nothing scenario. basically for both sides. And the sad part about this, and the one that we're not talking about obviously on here, because one, I just don't know enough, but the minor league seasons are likely to be canceled. An article on ESPN tonight already talked about potentially 1,000 or more minor league baseball players just being released and losing their job today, right?
Yeah,
and
I think
so
there were a dozen teams that cut their players today.
Right, and so there's a lot of careers in there that are done as of today. So there's a lot of fallout from this, and not just the major league level. Of course, that's the highest profile thing. That's what everybody's going to talk about, and I want to get back to that. So, look, I understand the default to outrage. Like, we're always going to side with players, or we're always going to side with owners. By the way, very few side with owners, but I think people in a business world that have to exist there understand a little bit more. Not that we think they walk on water and they make all the right decisions, but you got to understand, if you run a business, that's what it's about. You have to do the best thing for that business. Now, we know some organizations think very short term, and they screw themselves down the road. And so we certainly have a mix of organizations that can see long term and some that just don't. So I don't think that this proposal would be a little bit different from team to team to team. This is a collective proposal from the owners, because there are some that just cannot do what the financially better off organizations can do. And so what you're getting is your bottleneck. Let's say the proposal is only as strong as its weakest link. And they know that if they go in with a proposal that third of the organizations just can't afford, that's why they're proposing what they're proposing. I believe. I could be wrong, but I believe that's where it's coming from.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that that Scott Boras has inserted himself into this, and not only inserted himself into this, but pretty clearly stuck his foot in his mouth and started talking about things that he doesn't know about, because he used the Cubs as the example of the bad ownership groups that he was talking about when he put out his release to the players that obviously was strategically leaked. And he talked about how they had used debt financing in order to purchase the team. But what he neglected to include, and probably didn't realize, was that the Cubs were actually required to debt finance their purchase of the Cubs through the agreement with the Tribune. The Tribune extended out their ownership percentage of the Cubs, and the Ricketts only just this past season were able to finish the purchase of the Cubs and make it a 100% wholly owned entity. So think about it. They purchased that team, and what was it, Elliott? It was 2012, right?
Yeah.
So 8 years later, they finally have completed that purchase. That's why it was a requirement of the sale from the Tribune company that they had to debt finance that purchase.
2011.
Yeah, so there you go. So 9 years.
Yeah, there you go.
9 years. A requirement by the team that was selling it. So I'm sure that the Ricketts would have loved to have just bought it outright and been done with it and not had to finance it, because, come on, we know that they have the money for it. But they weren't allowed to as the terms of the sale. And Boras neglected to mention that, either because he didn't know or because that it didn't serve his purpose. And that's part of the reason why, and not even knowing he was going to be a part of it, that was part of the reason why I was so pessimistic when we started talking about this last week. And I said that I've got a bad feeling about this, because I don't see this going anywhere but down. And I have a feeling, Ron, that you're going to have to dig out that T-shirt in a couple of weeks.
Just get some Sharpies and write 2020 over the top. Yeah, I didn't think this. It's funny because just 2 days ago, Jim and I, for Two Birds on a Bat, Ruffled Feathers, recorded a very late show on Thursday, which you guys were texting me in the middle of, by the way. And I felt optimistic that night, even though we knew there was going to be a lot of back and forth. But the fact that they were talking and they had everything on the table, I kind of went, Pete, to this place where I go, they've got to see this long term, right? They got to see the long-term ramifications of not playing this year because of money. Like, if it comes down to money during a pandemic and they decide not to go back on the field, I know there's risks, right? And there are people that are going to take them to another level than what we would even personally. So I get that part. But if they can't make it work and it comes down to money, you're going to have small percentage of people pissed off at the players, huge percentage pissed off at the owners. And baseball is going to suffer another setback when it's feel like it was starting to make progress with the other sports, baseball becoming something relevant again, something more interesting than it has been. This could potentially take a step back. And so that's the fear. I feel very different tonight than I did 48 hours ago, reading what I've read. This could look, if either side takes a hard line here, there's a very real possibility we will not have baseball this year. Let me ask him. Let me bring him on. I took him on. I have had him on mute because he's rubbing his damn phone against something and it's making an awful sound. So I'm going to take him off mute right now.
You know what he's rubbing his phone against.
It's his bedding, trust me, because he does it every time. I mean, you might as well have 80 grit sandpaper rubbing right on the microphone head. I think he does it on purpose, but I'm going to take him off mute. Braden, if we don't have baseball in 2020, what's life going to be like for you, who you were like me at 15? If I didn't have what I wanted, I was a teenager, had no appreciation for the things that Pete just disappeared. Okay, that's great. There he is. Braden, okay, just ask you a question. What's life going to be like for you this summer if you don't have baseball?
Well, first of all, it's going to suck, but I'm going to take matters in my own hands. I'm going to replace Rob Manfred on MLB The Show. Everyone gets paid. I'm Oprah, okay? Everyone gets everything.
Uh-huh.
I'm rebuilding the bad teams. I'm in the leagues. I'm beating people. I'm just gonna take baseball to the show. That's gonna be me. I'm making the league greater again. Like that's just gonna happen.
Oh,
in my own world.
Okay. Guys, any comments to that? Because I don't know how I'd feel about my son one day becoming commissioner of baseball, because part of me thinks he would do great things. The other part of me thinks that he would blow up half the league, hopefully starting with the Padres. By the way, and we can mention my text later. Any thoughts about this? Because it both delights me and scares the shit out of me that Braden would even consider. I'd even consider him as a future executive in Major League Baseball, making important decisions that impact the game and everybody around it. I'm not sure how I feel with that kind of power and control in his hands, given his behavior over the last year in regards to baseball.
I mean, seeing some of the stuff that's coming from the players makes me think that there's the MLB Players Association and the MLB owners aren't going to come to terms, because the owners are looking to kind of cut costs, and it's starting with the salaries, and the players are like, listen, we signed contracts. If we agree to this, what's going to be next? And I kind of agree with the players on this sentiment. But I mean, we are, as people keep saying, in special times here. But who was it on our YouTube roundtable decision was asking, did you see the tweet coming from Max Scherzer?
Yes.
And if you're not familiar with it, he said, after discussing the latest developments with the rest of the players, there's no reason to engage with MLB in any further compensation reductions. We have previously negotiated a pay cut in the version of prorated salaries, and there's no justification to accept a second pay cut based upon the current information the union has received. He's like, I'm glad to hear other players voicing the same viewpoint and believe MLB's economic strategy would completely change if all documentation were to become public information. And I kind of agree with him.
You should probably pull up Trevor Bauer's tweet as well.
I saw his too.
Yeah.
And his makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it really does. Now we've got some people, at least on the Facebook. I know this is a great thing, guys. Problem is I can't look at them all together. And by the way, with the new program we're using tonight, we're taking baby steps. There's a lot more capabilities here. I can have the Periscope feed up. I can have other things up. You don't want to put too many buttons in front of me. In fact, you want to give me the remote that has like 3 or 4 big, huge buttons on it, and just start adding them. Week at a time, just like add one, because if you overwhelm me at the beginning, I'm going to freeze up like a deer in headlights on these things, and I'm probably just going to drink stuff faster. I want to go to the Facebook feed because we've got a couple friends on here that have joined and talked to us. We have our friend Elle, who says, she typed something long. I think that both sides are failing to see is that at this particular moment, optics are bad, and when you need fans to return, it's probably best to calm down a bit on both sides. I don't disagree with that at all. you can we can send Trevor Bauer your way. Let's see if you can work him out in your gym and calm him down.
I think the owners and the players right now are playing a game of chicken, and the only people losing out are the fans.
The fans and everybody else that's impacted by the game financially.
And the workers. Yeah.
Absolutely. We've got Sam Smith's on with us, and we haven't I haven't heard from him. I was on fire on that show. I'm not sure what he's talking about. Maybe the Two Birds show. Yeah, I was a little emotional the other night. Braden, your mom commented that you got a haircut. I saw that the other day. So I can't see you right now because I know you're playing with your bangs. They're probably a lot shorter than they were the other night that we were talking to you. But this is a. Well, I don't know. I mean, I 2 days ago I was kind of siding. I wasn't siding with ownership. I was siding against the fans that default outrage to ownership, right? That fail to look into the details, that don't bother looking at certain realities and just thinking that defaulting to the excuse greed, and that's it. Lowballing players, greed. That's the point I was trying to make on the show the other night. Like, I don't believe that. There's a lot more to that story, and I know that in our minds, all owners are billionaires, and they can afford this stuff. And, they're not going to starve, pay the players, and let's get our game back. It is not that simple. And it's not. You might think it's that simple for the Yankees, and maybe it is. It might be simple like that for an owner like Jerry Jones. It's not that simple if you're the owner of the Oakland A's. And by the way, so all these owners have to agree on these proposals. It has to be a majority. And you're not going to get a majority. Not everybody's going to vote like the Steinbrenners are. So it's not as simple as just wagging your finger at the owners and saying, you greedy bastards, you pay these guys. It's a lot more complex than that. But let me ask you guys this, Pete. Hold on, I had you on mute because there was a train or a car or a clown car or something that was outside. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you alluded to it before, and my concern really is for the long-term health of baseball, because you're right. If we don't have a season, that's going to hurt baseball. But what's also going to hurt is the fact that there are potentially dozens of teams that will not exist in the minor leagues come next year. I mean, we already know baseball is planning to cut a number of them anyway. I mean, that's already in the works. But the vast majority of the minor league teams, my understanding is they've already spent the money that they're spending on the 2020 season. So that's just the way that the minor league model is set up, is all the expenditures come in the beginning of the season, and then they make revenue the rest of the year just to make up for it. So they're outlaying a lot of money at the start of the season.
Yeah.
And so I think that we're going to see teams that get cut, and then on top of that, we're going to see teams that close down and that maybe never come back. In addition, the draft being shrunk this year because of coronavirus.
5 rounds, right?
But then also the plan being that the minor league draft is going to get shorter in the future. And then all of a sudden, you're going to have fewer people playing baseball on top of losing a season. Baseball could really become a minor league sport in the years to come if they don't fix this soon.
Anytime you're talking about shrinking the talent, shrinking the farm systems at all, right? Anywhere. I don't see how that can ever be a good thing. Look, baseball is always Look at how many people have come up from out of nowhere in minor league systems. You have, I'm going to have to put you on mute again because you're typing like a mule. You sound like Trigger, the old horse on the road. So I'm just going to mute you while you're typing away. So, yeah, whenever you shrink a farm system, I don't know how that benefits anybody or anything. Okay, so it costs some Major League Baseball teams some money, but think about guys you've brought up, like they come up from out of nowhere. Albert Pujols was drafted in the 13th round. Would he have started out at one of these teams or cities that you're cutting? Mike Piazza was drafted as a favor. He's a Hall of Famer. Yeah, 2 extreme examples. I get it, but you have a lot of other players that have made their way up that have played in these cities they're planning on shutting down. I don't know nearly enough about it because I just don't follow the minor leaguers as much as some other people. And I don't know who is pinging me. I'm going to check real quick. But I only know enough to be dangerous. And but you always get more viewers. Yeah, I can't put it. I can't. Okay, so I'm going to answer your question publicly. I can't put Braden on camera because the new software we have only allows 3 people at a time. The show has 3 hosts, so going forward, we'll have to get creative on how we bring people on. Audio is about the only way I can bring people on, unless I kick Elliott off, which I've been close a few times. But
this is true.
But yeah, honestly, on this new software, we only have slots for 3 people. I'm sorry. As much as I'd love to have my son on from time to time, maybe I can have you on In the Cards, and we can talk about your illegal trades you pull off on MLB The Show. Although you claim that you don't do that, I'm not quite buying it. Yeah, so I don't know enough about the minor leagues to talk enough about it intelligently, right? I know there's a lot of people out there that do, like Tara Wellman, Kyle Reese, that kind of that's a lot of their focus, that's their thing. But I can't talk about it enough. But it is sad to see that a quarter of minor league teams could potentially be out of business come next year. And when we shrink a farm system across baseball, I just don't know how that improves the game at all. I don't know how that streamlines things and improves them whatsoever. In fact, I see you limit the possibilities for 25% of people that have the talent enough to play professional baseball. You've cut 25% of them potentially, right? So I don't know how that's a good thing at all. On top of what's happening right now, I'm not going to go as far to say, guys, that this looks like a disaster, but could it be? Trigger's still going. Done?
Yeah, it absolutely could be a disaster. 100%.
Yeah, I didn't want to go that far to say that, but it kind of feels like it. So, Braden, hey, I don't know if you have an opinion on cutting. What's your thought? Like, hey, if 25% of the minor league teams don't exist next year or in the next 2 years, like as a guy, God, I gotta mute him again. Son of a bitch, you become the new. Have you guys swapped chairs tonight?
I guess so.
We got sump pump to the right. I've got extreme keyboard on the center. I'm muting you. But Braden, if you cut out 25% of the prospect pool, what's that do to the game, in your opinion? Because you not only play MLB The Show on a major league level, but obviously you're paying attention to the young names that come up, and you have your own personal thoughts and ratings and feelings on what those guys are capable of.
Well, when I rebuild teams like, the Orioles, Tigers, Royals, and things like that, because I try to make them good because they're not. I try to trade for what my plan is I get all the old bad contracts out of the way, and then I try to trade for the team's biggest needs, and then most importantly, I trade for the young prospects. I trade for the guys that, have A+ potential and they're big needs. And if you cut out some of those guys or you cut out those teams, like, it affects my trades, man. And I don't do it on the forced trades. I'm a good GM. I know how to get a good trade, unlike some of these teams, I'm not going to say who, but if you're a baseball fan, you know who. So that affects my trading. That affects my mojo of my biggest mode, and especially for the career mode, if I want to get drafted by a cool minor league team with a cool park, that affects me too, I want to look cool when I play baseball. I don't want to look like a scrub out there, so.
Yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying. I just, look, again, I only have a limited knowledge here on how many who has minor league teams in what places and what ones are at risk of getting cut. I know people that know a lot more about it than me. I would love to have them on here at some point in time to talk about it, because it sounds like it's a reality that these teams are not going to exist in the next year or two, which is, I don't know how it's a good thing. Pete, your point I think you were making earlier was, look, there are a population of little league teams and little kids in these cities that are potentially going to lose their teams. That, what if that's just that much more interest in baseball that could potentially be lost, right? And I don't know how much that's worth financially, but you would have to think that, gosh, is it really worth taking that risk given the way things are right now? And it feels like it's just the timing is just horrible for something like this to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. They couldn't have planned this any worse if they had tried. Yeah. I mean, if Rob Manfred wanted to destroy baseball, what would he have done differently than what he's currently doing?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a problem for a lot of teams in the coming years, that there's going to be a lot of these players that you would have seen come up through some of these minor league teams that aren't ever going to get a chance. and it's a shame because there are some really good players who just needed a few more years of seasoning in the minors to become a star, and we're probably not going to see that now.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. And I think the other part of this is just that I worry about, and that is the interest. Look, I developed an interest in hockey because of a minor league team that was in Peoria, Illinois, that was affiliated with the Blues for a long period of time. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had it. Now, this is not coming from a prospective player, but at least a fan, right? I became a hockey fan because of the Peoria Rivermen, not because of the St. Louis Blues. It was because of the Peoria Rivermen who were affiliated with them. You're going to run into those cases in 42 potential cities now, where you're going to lose a few kids and a few more kids and a few more kids every year because they don't have local professional baseball that they can go and see. And so that's the sad part. Now, I don't know what the hardship is really in reality financially to these teams that are affiliated. I'm sorry, the parent clubs. I don't know what the financial hit is to those folks. I don't know why baseball and Rob Manfred are stepping in on this. Braden, hold on a second. I've got to merge calls. We should get an interesting perspective on what's going on now. We might have to take a step back in the show and actually talk about some things from the past, because we have an old friend has joined us. His name's Dustin. He lives in Bloomington, Illinois, I believe, unless he's moved on me, because we don't talk. But we talk about every election, I think, and so I think it's been a few years actually. I think he's called in on the show a few times, but we're going to step out of baseball just for a second, unless he wants to go back there. But I'd like to welcome on my old friend who I grew up with, who when I got a new bike, he kicked his bike and said, "I hate my crappy bike," and that's my childhood friend Dustin, who happens to be a Cub fan and a Packers fan that goes against everything I believe in, but I still love him anyway. Don't know why, but he's on with us. It's been a while. Dustin, how have you been?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I've been, as well as anybody else here in the Corn Belt. I'm well, friend. Thank you.
Okay.
Actually, I thought the time was correct to call in when you brought up the Rivermen.
Yeah.
Because you and I would make those trips to Peoria in your first little truck and go see Rivermen games. They were a hot team right when we were in high school. And right about the time we were able to get out of town and do stuff we wanted to do.
Yeah,
so
right.
Ron and I would get a 10-pack of tacos on, Knoxville Avenue at like 11 o'clock at night, not knowing where we were at after going and seeing a hockey game sober as youth.
It was completely sober because it was in the high school days.
Oh, absolutely.
And it truly was. And,
thank God.
But
imagine the trouble.
Yeah, no shit.
Imagine the trouble we could have gotten into.
Yeah, I'm so glad for that. And, this was before the days of GPS. I mean, Christ, we didn't have BlackBerries at this time. And there was no way to just pull up your phone and figure out where the hell you were at. Some of those back roads going in and out of Knoxville through Limestone, and we thought, which was a shorter way to the Civic Center. I'm sure if you looked at where we were going on a map, we looked like people that were trying to evade the law somehow. But we weren't.
Right, exactly. But we weren't. We were sober, but we were cruising around like secret agents, just doing stuff.
Just trying to find this Peoria Civic Center.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
That's very true.
It is very true.
We were. I of course am the keeper of many a good story. I try to let them out at the appropriate time. But keeping in mind we were very sober, high school kids for the largest part. Much more than our peers,
Yes.
I'd say. And we had more fun anyway. It was a good time. I have thoughts on baseball, but I had waited until you guys actually had talked out a few other things before I came in and derailed your podcast tonight.
No, that's okay. I know you have thoughts on it. You're the son of Fred. You have thoughts.
Oh, of course, I have thoughts on everything.
And you have the stage. So if you've been paying attention to any of this back and forth, one more point I wanted to make, Dustin, before I let you go ahead and have the platform here. And Braden, you can follow up with that. Braden's on with us too, by the way.
I've been watching. Yeah.
here's the thing. Like we've talked a lot about the owners and fans' perceptions of just defaulting to being angry with owners, right? And I get it. I totally
Right.
get it. Here's the thing, though.
Right.
When you're a player who makes a couple $1 million, what do you think? Now, I get their side of it, but what do you think that furloughed worker thinks about your comments? What do you think about those stadium employees that no longer have pay or a job? People that have just flat out lost their jobs. When you hear somebody who's you're only going to make $7.8 million, I mean, sometimes I just think that some of these guys, and look, whatever you believe is fair or not, you have an opinion on. Everybody has a right to voice it. But gosh, I mean, look, some of the people that are buying your jerseys don't have jobs now. Some of the people that had tickets to go to a game later this year, one game because they can't afford to go to many more, they're out of a job. And I think that don't just think that these people are just going to be pissed off at your ownership or your boss. Like, they're going to look at you and go, really? You're not going to come back. I'm not going to be employed. What am I supposed to think of you in the out years here? Like, what am I going to? Am I going to bend over backwards? Am I going to spend, 3 of my 10 vacation days that I'm allowed annually to go watch you play next year, right? I mean, there's going to be an impact all around. And I think that a majority of people have an opinion against the owners, but you got to think, man, there's some people looking at players going, well, you know what? I think there's a lot of people that are looking at both sides going, Jesus Christ, can't you guys figure this out? You've all lost money this year anyway, but none of you are starving. None of you are worried about how you're going to make your next mortgage payment or rent payment. We are.
I was waiting for you to actually say the magic word, and it's money. As we used to play this game together, and we fell in love at the same time, even though my father's more of a lifeguard, your dad clearly more of a ball player. This runs on everything else, like everything else. I mean, on money, and you're not burdened with knowing that when you're young. And even when we were teenagers, I was going to bring up the '94 season, of course,
which was fabulous.
It doesn't, you stop buying baseball cards one year, and then 2 years later, you're driving to go see the Peoria Chiefs in the town next over. We didn't ever have to think about that. I live in a community. I still live in Bloomington Normal. I've been carrying mail here for 21 years, and we have a minor league team, very small farm team, the Corn Belters. They're not a farm for anything right now. But, I have local baseball accessible to me. My brother's been a business partner to the team in one degree or another for years. And I have to step back from it, take my hands off of it, like I've learned to do with a lot of things these days, things that I used to love and used to think like being engaged with and having opinions on made my love of it more refined or better. It isn't that way anymore. This is simply about money, but it involves something we love. And I don't know. I think baseball is a luxury.
It certainly
maybe even when it comes down to children in small communities.
Yeah, you know what?
Diseases or not, I can't say it's not essential. It is to me.
It is, but no, I agree with you, Dustin. But that's kind of the thing I've fallen into here recently is that baseball does feel like a luxury to me, and I can live without it. And it sounded strange. Talking to these guys about this because that was the whole basis and premise of why we were on.
Exactly.
Why we were spending an hour every week talking about this stuff because we love this game so much. But you know what? Honestly,
and why I tune in.
Well, but through this pandemic, I have not been dying without it. I would love to see it back.
Right.
Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But look, if this season's canceled, I'm going to get through the summer just fine. I'm going to get through the early fall just fine. I'm not going to.
Right.
And I know a lot of other people. There's several other people. If you trust me, if you watch a Baseball Premise podcast once a week, if you actually watch us live once a week, you're a diehard baseball fan. It might be hard to hear from us.
For sure. Which describes my limited involvement with you guys' thoughts on baseball. I'm a fan, and I like to keep it that way. You know what I mean? It's the more I try to steer the bike, the less I want to ride it with baseball. And the truth is, The last time I talked to you, we had just lost the last game of the regular season to the Brewers going into the playoffs 2 years ago. And I think I feel exactly the same tonight as I did that night, but just for a different reason. Now we got a new reason to either blame or describe the feelings and problems we've had with this sport that we love. Yeah. And we're all grown ups. You guys do this out of love. You can talk about the weather. You can talk about Star Wars. We can talk about Frank Zappa. That'd be great. But people will still seek out what they love.
I don't think we'd have a ton to offer on that.
Baseball still matters. Baseball still matters. Baseball, if it's going to rely only on money and not heritage and love, which it hasn't for a long time, it's going to shrink. I'm glad I'm not the guy who's supposed to tell you how.
No, and I'm not asking you how, but I do appreciate, as always, your opinion on it. And Braden,
for sure.
Braden, I want you to jump in here just for a second, because look, I know it might be strange hearing this from your dad, that if they decide to cancel the season this year, I'm not going to have a cow. I'm not gonna stop talking about baseball on here. It's going to continue, although the premise of our show has shifted. But is that a shock to you, hearing that? You know what? Hey, I'm okay. You know, if they cancel the season, I'm not gonna lose a hell of a lot of sleep over it. If they do it, it's on them to figure out how they're going to recover from it. Right? That's what I'm more interested in talking about at this point. If they make the decision not to get back on the field, and they choose to reveal any transparency whatsoever, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that, because I believe there's a reason on both sides why you wouldn't want to do it. For some people, it'll be the risk of getting coronavirus. For others, it'll be the risk of, look, I'm better off not having a season than I am paying you guys for half a season. I'm going to lose, and it's going to impact me for years down the road. I'm better off not playing. Like, what's that like to hear that from us? Well, you've been on this show. We're baseball people. We're huge fans, but I'm okay. I'm not going to die if they don't play.
Well, for me, I think it comes down. I don't think this is about the virus anymore. I truly think that they could put in a plan for about 2 to 3 weeks. I think we would have baseball in July. But as far as with the owners and the money goes, I think that's what's holding everything back, as what it seems like anymore. But I can't see them saying, nope, season's done. I think they're going to ride this till the end, until, like, you just can't start a season anymore. Like, if they don't start a season by July, there won't be a season, because you can't start a season with 80 games or whatever. It's starting in August. It's not going to happen. Like, I can't see them play in August, September, October. Like, I think they're going to ride it out until, like, you just can't do it anymore. But I don't even think it's about the virus anymore. I think if they waited, till things cleared up a bit, or they waited till July, I think you could get in baseball. Because I just think it's about the money and the owners and the players anymore. Because that's all everybody talks about. Nobody's talking about, the virus, and everyone's playing baseball. That's what people are talking about with the NBA and NHL. But with the MLB, it just seems like more of the problem is just money.
Yeah, well, I think it doesn't help. It doesn't help this matter. And Pete, you can probably speak to this. It doesn't help the matter that they've got a CBA coming up in less than 2 years. So, I mean, if that wasn't there, you would have to wonder, okay, how's that impacting? Like, if any side shows weakness right now, it affects. You'd have to think, in their minds at least, if you're trying to play a strategy out long term, and you give in now, how's that impact you on this new collective bargaining agreement? Which we had to think that the players were going to come at that one hard. I mean, with service time, with all these other things that are actually working against them. They wanted to counter a lot of that stuff this next time around, and now here. That's what I think. I think that's one of the little wrenches that's thrown into this thing. The fact that's just around the corner. I know it sounds like a long way out, but if we miss baseball for a year, you have a 21 season. As soon as it's over, you've got a brand new CBA that has to be negotiated. And I think that That's got to be playing in their minds, especially if you're a union rep or if you're Tony Clark. I mean, that's what you're thinking about, right?
Well, supposedly Tony Clark's not involved in the process at this point. That it's now the union's lawyer that is guiding strategy, which would indicate why they're taking such a hard line.
Mm-hmm.
And if there was more time, I might be more sanguine about this is just a negotiation. You take your hard position because you're looking to gain things. And if they did have that benefit of more time, I could absolutely understand the players coming out and saying, we don't want to do this. And then coming back and saying, okay, well, here's the thing. If you guys want us to take greater cuts than we already agreed to in March, here are the things that we're going to want. Just like you said, Ron, service time. When does that clock start? And all the other things that the players feel like they were taken advantage of in the most recent CBA.
Right.
The problem is that the timeline that's been laid out is that baseball needs to make a decision in a week. We have 1 week to get this negotiation done. If they want to do exactly what Braden said, and they want to start
in July
with spring training 2 in mid-June so that baseball can start in July. The negotiations can't go on. This can't be a normal negotiation where you're starting in July and you're continuing through until February of next year and you're having multiple meetings and you're going back for strategy sessions. This is something that needs to be taken care of right now. And baseball taking a harder line position than they had even previously indicated, and then the players staying out no, we're not going to even negotiate on that as their starting point, bodes horribly for the future of the 2020 season.
It does, and I think there's a thing on here that complicates it more. I'm interested to hear what all of you guys think on this, and that is, look, there are players under contract that are backloaded, not front-loaded. Think about like Garrett Cole this year, right? He could sit out this year. He's got, 9 years beyond this? Nothing preventing that guy from saying, you know what, I'm not exposing myself to this. You're asking me to take a fraction of what my contract says I'm supposed to make. I already agreed to half of it. You're asking to have me take a further cut. That's fine. I'll just sit out this year. It's guaranteed. You still owe me for the next 9 years. I'm still going to make a ton of money. There are other players like that around the league. And you'd have to think that, players like Mike Trout, who's on a relatively new contract, right? He's got years left on his. A lot of other guys do too, and they're the highest paid players who could take a stance and be like, you know what, we're not going to do it. That's fine. You play your season. You're not going to have Mike Trout. You're not going to have Garrett Cole. You're not going to have some of these. Strasburg just signed a big deal, right? So you could have a lot of players like this that potentially say, you know what, it's not worth it for me. Why am I going to go out for a fraction of what I'm owed, risk getting hurt, risk something else happening, risk getting this virus, risk bringing it back home to my family, when I can just sit out this year, stay at home, I'll be back next year. You still owe me the money anyway. It's not like you're going to cut me. You're still going to have to pay me. So I think that there are other factors we haven't had time to talk about on here, but they're very real and they exist. So there are high-profile players, highly paid players, throw Bryce Harper in there too, that can afford to sit out this year. It's really not going to impact them too much. So what do you guys think? I mean, do you think something like that could come up? You'd have to think that at least one or two of these guys could attempt at least to use that as a I don't want to say like a bargaining chip or a positioning, but that could be a reality, could it not?
Well, from a pure negotiating standpoint,
Elliott, you might have yourself on mute. I saw your lips moving. I didn't hear anything. Okay, I've got you off mute. Okay, Elliott will have to mail in his opinion on this, and we'll post it. I don't have you on mute, buddy. I promise you. But Pete, go ahead, and I'll see if we can figure out what's going on.
Yeah, what I was going to say is from a pure negotiating standpoint, what baseball has proposed is designed clearly to drive a wedge in the Players Association, in that the people who take the biggest cuts are the ones who are highest paid. And so Max Scherzer stands to lose a lot of money. Mike Trout, the highest echelon of players are the ones who are going to experience the strongest hit. And the players at the bottom end of the spectrum are going to receive the majority of their pay. Everybody's going to take a cut, but the biggest cuts are designed to come from the elite. And the way that I'm not saying it's right, but the way that it's a somewhat effective negotiating strategy is that I think it's something like 60% of the players make less than $1 million. I think that's what I read. It may be even less than that. And so for them, it means a lot to be able to keep 60 or 70% of their pay and have the elites be able to have to survive on $7.8 million. So from a negotiating standpoint, it's brilliantly set up.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, do the guys at the upper end of the pay scale take a hit in order to ensure the strength of their entire union, or do they tell the guys at the bottom end of the pay scale, no, you're making $500,000 this year, you need to make nothing because we're not going to accept this deal because I signed a contract for $35 million and I deserve to be paid $35 million.
Yeah. Elliott, can we hear you yet?
Probably no.
No, I got you.
Okay.
Did you even remember what we were talking about, or have you tried to figure out for the last 5 minutes why your sound wasn't on? And do we need to come back to you? Do I need to give you another minute to process this while I go over to my son? I will. I'll give you a minute. High-profile players that are players that are on front-loaded contracts could absolutely sit out this year, right? And knowing that they're guaranteed money years beyond, they don't have to take the risk this year, and they can take the hardline stance, support the union, support the cause, and just say, you know what, not doing it, I'm not giving in. I'm just not playing. But I'm going to come back to you. So I know you were trying to figure something out. Oh, you got it.
Yeah,
you found your footing. Okay.
I had a thought before, and I wasn't listening to Pete at all, so I'm not even sure if he said this at all. But I think it's. I feel like if some of these high-profile players would take that position, I feel like it'd be it'd look bad. It'd look bad for the fans that like them. And I think it would look bad for the team. So I feel like some of these guys should actually be advocates for actually playing rather than kind of doing what some of these NFL guys say, if I'm not going to get my way, I'm just going to sit out.
I can totally see it happen.
We know from history, it never really ends up good for these NFL players when they do that.
No, most, you're right. Most do not. You have a couple case studies though that have actually come out of this. But before I get into that, I want to get into NFL yet. We're going to talk XFL here in a second. Just kidding, we're not. Dustin, just your thoughts on what I was talking about players could potentially. And then Braden, I want to go to you about the same question. What are your thoughts, both of you, on? Look, there could be a few high-profile players that are on the early years of their contracts that are still going to make a ton of money. They might have a lot less incentive to go back out there this year. And so now the union may not like that, or the union might if they take a hard stance. So what are your thoughts on if players like Mike Trout or anybody else that's on early parts of their contract, like Bryce Harper, Manny Machado is another one, right? That they could afford to sit out this year. If they're only going to make a few $1 million, why the hell worry about it?
I would go ahead, Braden.
I could see, a guy like Mike Trout, though, he might be chasing stats or numbers in the history books. I could see some of those guys who, or some of those guys that just want to play, they want to get back out there. Like Harper put out his own plan and all that. I could see some guys doing that, like Machado, because he's lazier than a 300-pound guy sitting on the couch eating Cheetos. But, I could see some guy like Machado doing that, but I could, like Mike Trout, say he sits out. He's under Mickey Mantle for some stat or some history book record or whatever. I could see people in 10 years saying, oh, well, if Mike Trout didn't sit out, or they could pull like a Jordan, like, oh, if Jordan didn't sit out, he could get this ring, or if Mike Trout didn't sit out, he could get this, that, or any player like that.
Are you saying Mike Trout, since he's reached his pinnacle, should just go ahead and try to play in the NBA for a year or two and then come back? That'd be funny.
I could just see, some of these high profile guys I wouldn't see sitting out, but some of these low key guys, Manny Machado, he said the only way he'd go to the White Sox is if he played third base on away games because he didn't want to run. a certain amount of distance. Like, come on, man, really? So some of these players, yeah, but you look at a Mike Trout, a Bryce Harper, or Garrett Cole. I don't see it.
Yeah.
If they were to sit out.
Yeah, I don't know how I can see, but still, out of all those names, and you're probably right, Braden. There's certain guys just out of principle wouldn't do that, but I have to believe that there are a handful that would. You don't know about these players' personal situations. You don't know if they have somebody that's higher risk at home that they don't want to go out, and if they can make enough money, they already know they're guaranteed enough money. I can see it. I can see this happening in a few cases, and so. It'd be interesting to see how the owners respond when one of them has one of their core players or star players. It's just I ain't coming back. I don't know ultimately what that would do, but that could be a complication. I can definitely see that happening. All right, guys, we've run up to about the hour and a half mark here. I want to thank my old buddy for calling in though, Dustin. It's always great to hear your voice. I wish you'd do it more often.
I have thoughts on baseball, and Star Wars, but usually they're not of much help to what you're really trying to do. But I don't know. This really, we'll see. This is the reason we have things in the world called contracts, though. And I can tell you, somebody brought up the number 10 years from now, something, in regards to 10 years from now, and I really take a look at it. I think for a good 3 years here in Illinois, they could continue to sell Cubs gear before anybody realized there was no longer a team. But a lot of our newer fans. But it's going to be interesting.
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting with the uptake in the drinking habits among most Americans. Though, if they can get back to an earlier half season start somehow, I think they can really make up on the concessions in a hurry.
Smitty, thank you so much for the compliment. He said, "Great show tonight, guys." I'm not sure I agree with him. It's been a solid show. It hasn't been one of our best. I think one of our best could have possibly actually been one of our worst, and that was a few months ago when we had Elle on with us, and Pete wore that mask the entire night. That could have been our best or worst, according to Greg Yackey. We'll have to connect with him again and see, did he determine whether it was our best or worst? We're not sure. But Dustin and Braden, so glad to have you guys on. Braden, you have to explain to your mother that we have a new software system. We've broken free of BeLive. We're no longer beholden to that. It was started off as a pretty solid thing for us to do, limited to Facebook Live. We realized, but we've broke free of that. Those chains. Unfortunately, we only have room for 3 actual cameras on here, and these guys are taking up the other 2. Now, Braden, a long-term strategy for you would be to see how you could supplant one of these guys here just by being better than them, and I think you have a legitimate shot.
Undefeated, never lost.
That's right.
Never lost.
Those hot takes will come in, and they sound just fine even without the video.
That's right. Okay.
Got to keep them hot.
All right, guys. We appreciate both you being on with us tonight. Dustin, I hope you can do it more often. Braden, I'm sure you'll infiltrate again next week as we get ready to sign off here. So, fellas, have a good night.
Yeah, take care, gents.
All right, guys. All right. So as we sign off here tonight, Pete, just remind everybody. I'm sure you're going to add to the outro here what you say about where we're live now, because this is still a new thing. To remind anybody that joined us a little bit late, it was something that night. Yep, Elle is still on. She still has an eye on us here, and that was an interesting show. Pete sends his apologies for being he was just being Pete that night. There's nothing to apologize for. It's just Pete being maximum Pete. All right, so just to remind everybody, look, we might look a little bit different tonight, not to you folks on Facebook who always watch us here, but we also are live on Periscope, which is a newer thing for us. And Brad is stating he's been using Wirecast for about a month now. Yeah, this is our first night of using it. We've tested it a few nights, and there are some bugs, a little bit of a learning curve for us. So we'll open up our capabilities and maximize this as best we can. It is not a cheap alternative, but I hope it is a much better alternative, and it gets us out to many more venues for those of you who like to stream things. So, Pete, I'm not going to talk anymore. Go ahead, send us off.
Yes, sir. Well, I tell you, when we're not live on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope, you can find us anywhere and everywhere. Our website is teamarivalspodcast.com. We're on Twitter at Team Arrivals Pod, on Instagram at Team Arrivals Podcast, and on Facebook at Team Arrivals Podcast. Contact us by email at the show at teamarivalspodcast.com. You can find Elliott on Twitter at
TOR_Elliott.
Or you can find Ron at Ron
TOR_Ron75. Got it.
And where can we find Braden? Oh, yeah, that's right. On MLB The Show.
That's right.
You won't find me on Twitter, so don't waste your time looking. If you are watching us live, you can also catch us anywhere you listen to podcasts, either on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, for example. If you love this show, subscribe, unsubscribe, and then resubscribe. Let's get those numbers up there so that it appears that there are far more of you than there are, so that we can get the attention of people other than you. After you've done that, go ahead, leave us a review by going to ratethispodcast.com/TOR. Follow the simple instructions, and don't forget, make it a good one.
Make it a great one. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with us and joining us tonight on this episode. And we look forward to getting back to it next week. We'll get the hang of this thing. We'll get the hang of this thing more and more as we progress through the weeks here, and then we'll take a dip, and I'll get much worse for a few weeks, and then we'll be back, and we'll be very strong in about 8 to 10 weeks. We promise. Just hang with us. We love you all so much, though. Look forward to getting back to this next week. Bye, everyone.